So picture your favorite pop star belting out that massive, stadium-shaking anthem. You're probably picturing them pouring their heart out, right? Maybe strumming a guitar or frantically scribbling lyrics in a worn-out notebook. Well, I really hate to break the illusion, but the truth is usually a whole lot different. Because behind the glass of the recording booth stands the true architect of the music we all love. It's the person actually pulling the strings, engineering the emotion, and, quite literally doing the math, to get that hook permanently stuck in your head. Welcome to this explainer, where we are tracking the Mastermind's Ascent. We're going to see exactly how music producers evolved. They went from being those early technical engineers just twisting knobs in the background into these massive brand-building architects and billionaire hitmakers of modern pop. Let's just quickly glance at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the studio as an instrument, move on to the architects of new genres, and look at the systems of a pop hit. Then we dive deep into Max Martin's melodic math, unpack the psychology of catchiness, and finally look at producers as global brands. All right, Section 1, the studio as an instrument. We really have to kick things off by looking at the absolute pioneers, the ones who realized that the recording studio wasn't just a place to capture sound, but an actual compositional tool in itself. On one hand, you've got Phil Spector and his totally legendary wall of sound. Spector basically treated the studio like a literal army. He layered multiple instruments playing the exact same parts simultaneously. The result? This unprecedented, maximalist sonic density. And why'd he do it? Because he knew it would sound absolutely massive on commercial AM radio. Now, on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, we have Brian Eno, the godfather of ambient music. Eno went the totally opposite direction. He embraced minimalist space and texture, focusing heavily on atmosphere rather than rhythm. And this contrast proves something absolutely crucial. Music production isn't just about turning up the volume. It is a profound, foundational creative choice. Okay, moving on to Section 2, Architects of New Genres. So these legendary figures didn't just make hits. They established massive empires by forging entirely new genre identities. Take Berry Gordy. He essentially created the Motown sound by merging gospel vocals with incredibly tight pop hooks, all using an assembly line production system built specifically for commercial crossover. Then you have Dr. Dre, who architected G-Funk. He blended slower tempos with those distinct, totally iconic synthesizer whines, completely defining West Coast hip-hop. Look at Timbaland. He brought those crazy, syncopated, stutter-step beats straight to mainstream pop and R&B. And of course, Nile Rodgers used a highly percussive guitar groove to connect the dots from disco right into early hip-hop and modern dance music. They weren't just making songs, you guys. They were creating the actual templates. Which brings us to Section 3, Systems of a Pop Hit. Now, over time, commercial hit-making evolved from genre-fluid sophistication into a highly scientific approach. And honestly, no number illustrates that shift better than 27. Take a second to process that. 27. The producer known as Max Martin has written or co-written 27 Billboard Hot 100 #1 hits. That is literally more than almost anyone in the entire history of music, sitting only behind Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Wild, right? Let's zoom in on how he does it. Section 4, Max Martin's melodic math. So what's his secret? How does he do it over and over again? Well, Martin relies on a brilliant concept called melodic math. In his world, melody is absolutely king. Lyrics? They aren't poetry first. No, they are rhythmic shapes specifically designed to fit the tune perfectly. If you add or remove even one single syllable, you ruin the math. It's an entire system engineered from the ground up to maximize catchiness using very specific patterns and syllable counts. Let's actually walk through this exact blueprint. Step 1, you write the melody first. In fact, Martin often uses total nonsense or dummy words just to get the vowel sounds and the underlying rhythm perfect, before real lyrics are even a thought. Step 2 is syllable mirroring. Basically, if your first line is exactly 8 syllables long, the next line must be an 8-syllable mirror image. That way, the melody just naturally grooves. And then step 3, this is the golden rule. Do not make the listener wait. You absolutely must deliver that massive chorus payoff before the 50-second mark. Because let's face it, pop audiences have incredibly short attention spans. But hey, the math doesn't stop there. He applies strict rules to every single track. He limits songs to just 3 or 4 distinct melodic parts, so they stay laser-focused. In the studio, he introduces new production elements strictly one by one, so you never overwhelm the ear.
He'll deliberately save the singer's absolute highest vocal note for the section's climax, delivering this massive emotional release. But honestly, the real stroke of genius here is what he calls the glue hook. This is where Martin takes a tiny, almost subliminal snippet of the chorus melody and plants it early in the verse. So by the time the actual chorus arrives, your brain already thinks it's a familiar favorite. It's basically a Jedi mind trick for your ears.
And what about the speed? What is the exact tempo of a guaranteed hit? Well, the data shows that hitting a sweet spot right around 115 to 120 beats per minute creates the absolute perfect toe-tapping foundation. It's energetic, but without ever feeling frantic. All right, let's switch gears. Section 5, the psychology of catchiness. To really understand the underlying neuroscience of why these engineered tracks are just so irresistible, we have to look at what Max Martin calls sweet and salt. It is all about deliberate contrast. Think of it like this. If you have a verse that's rhythmically super busy, talky, and densely packed with syllables, that's the salt. It builds up all this tension. But when the chorus finally hits, the song switches to these sustained, drawn-out, major key anthemic notes, and that's the sweet. This dynamic contrast creates an absolute roller coaster of tension and release. It literally wakes your brain up every single time this section changes, delivering these continuous musical dopamine hits. And finally, let's zoom back out. Section 6, producers as global brands. So how exactly do these hitmakers leverage their studio dominance to build giant corporate empires? Just look at Max Martin's evolution. He wasn't just writing songs. The guy was building incubators. Back in 1994, he was part of Chiron Studios in Sweden, mastering that highly effective pop factory method. By 2001, musical trends were shifting, so he naturally adopted. He founded Marathon and drove a massive pop rock reinvention. And then, jumping to 2013, he expanded into MXM and Wolf Cousins, creating these elite global writer collectives. He totally adopted his business strategy to stay culturally relevant across 3 distinct decades of music. And listen, he certainly wasn't the only one building an empire. Remember Dr. Dre's G-Funk innovations? Well, Dre and Jimmy Iovine had this realization that people just weren't hearing the music the way it actually sounded in the recording studio. So in 2006, they founded Beats. Their main goal, package that premium studio-level emotion and sell it directly to consumers through headphones. And we all know how that turned out. It worked so incredibly well that Apple acquired Beats in 2014. That completely transformed Dre from a hip-hop genre architect into a literal consumer audio billionaire. These producers didn't just master the music, they completely transcended it. But you know what's fascinating? Despite all of this immense power and influence, many of these producers choose to stay completely out of the spotlight. Take 2016, for instance. When accepting a massive music award, Max Martin joked, "You blew my cover. For 20 years, I'd managed to hide between 2 speakers in a basement." And honestly, that is just an incredibly smart business strategy. By staying entirely behind the scenes, he lets the artists shine. The pop stars get all the fame, the paparazzi, and the magazine covers, while he consistently dominates the charts, pulling the strings from the shadows. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you're in on the secrets, now that you know all about the mirrored syllables, the glue hooks, the 50-second chorus rule, and that irresistible sweet and salt contrast, next time you turn on the radio, will you be able to hear the melodic math? I challenge you to actively listen for these hidden mechanics in your everyday life, because you might just realize that your absolute favorite song was a perfectly engineered equation all along. Thanks so much for hanging out for this explainer, and definitely keep your ears open.